This is a real treat, and I'm ever so happy to be sharing my book with you. This one is Robin Hood and His Merry Outlaws, retold from the old ballads by J. Walker McSpadden and Charles Wilson. It's a book that's had some age to it. You see this rip down the spine. Robin Hood and His Merry Men, McSpadden and Wilson, and the publisher Harrap. Nothing on the back other than some marks of age. I think I've probably had this book about 40 years. I remember buying it at a village jumble sale. Let's have a look at the detail. In fact, you can see the size of the book looking at the scale of my wristwatch and one of my favourite biros across century. So it's a big book. In terms of dates, here it says first published September 1921 by George G. Harrap and Co. Limited, 39 to 41 Parker Street, Kingsway, London. Reprinted January 1926, October 1930, and this edition April 1932. Okay, and it was printed by Jarrold and Sons Limited in Norwich. Because it's such a large book, I'm going to split this down, I think, into, I'm not sure, it might be 3 or 4 readings, it might be several more videos, but let's see how we get on with it. One of the things I love about this book, and as we go through it, in fact, I'm going to flick through some pages and show you, it has beautiful illustrations. And of course, I can't find any as I'm looking through. Here we go. Little John fighting with the cook in the sheriff's house. Little John wrestling at Gamewell. Little John defeating Eric of Lincoln. So as we go through, we'll see lots of nice things. So the contents, it goes up to 24 chapters. And here we have some details of the illustrations. So we've got Robin Hood and his companions rescue Will Stutely. Robin meets Maid Marian. The ones I've showed you, Little John defeats Eric of Lincoln, Little John again wrestling at Gamewell, Little John fights with the cook in the sheriff's house, and then we'll see some others. Country folk wending their way to the tourney meaning tournament. Little John sings at the banquet, and the passing of Robin Hood. Robin Hood holds a very special place in my heart because I was born in Sherwood, and of course, lots of the tales of Robin Hood are set in Sherwood Forest in the county of Nottinghamshire. Here we are. Robin Hood. Introduction. Songs and legends of Robin Hood and his merry outlaws have charmed readers young and old for more than 500 years. They're among the earliest heirlooms of the Anglo-Saxon tongue, dating back to the time when Chaucer wrote his Canterbury Tales and the minstrel and scribe stood in the place of the more prim and precise modern printing press. The present stories, then, are but the retelling of old tales, whose charm and interest nonetheless make them ever new. The old tales were in rhyme and ancient spelling, they were hid in out-of-the-way places, and they were more or less disconnected and obscure to our modern thinking. For this reason, the adventures are now put into a continuous prose narrative, in the hope that they will make some readers acquainted with one of the most attractive heroes in all Storyland. Was Robin Hood a real person? Will doubtless be the first question. It has been asked for many, many years, just as a similar question is being asked about the great Swiss hero William Tell, and many others whom we would much rather accept on faith. The question of Robin Hood's flesh and blood cannot be answered by a brief yes or no, although learned men have pored over ancient records and have written books on the subject, some saying that he actually did live in the greenwood and fight with bow and staff and sword. Others claiming that his deeds were but legendary stories relating to a group of men rather than a single historical person. And still others saying that he is but the embodiment of Maytime revels. However that may be, Robin Hood has been the one great popular hero in England for centuries, and the accounts of his life are much more clear and distinct than those of many early kings and lords. His adventures are minutely related in numerous ballads, and his name is cherished as one of the first among those who stood out for liberty and equal rights to high and low. If ever a man has been loved by his country, it is Robin Hood. It is he, says an old historian, whom the common people delight to celebrate in games and comedies, and whose history, sung by fiddlers, interests them more than any other. In the 16th century, an annual holiday was set apart for him and observed by all the people in the countryside. Bishop Latimer once visited a certain town and announced that he would preach there the next day. But on the morrow, when he went to the church, he found the doors locked and no congregation in sight. After he had waited for over an hour for the key, a man came up and said, "Sir, this is a busy day for us. We cannot hear you. It is Robin Hood's day. The parish is gone abroad to gather for Robin Hood." The bishop himself tells us of this incident and adds with hurt dignity, "I was fain there to give place to Robin Hood." So he took off his robe and went his way, leaving his place to archers dressed in Lincoln green, who played on rude stages the parts of Robin Hood, Little John, Friar Tuck, and even Maid Marian. There is one more reason why Robin has been a national hero. He was not simply a robber and a brawler. We must not make too much of these traits in the turbulence and lawlessness of early days, when king warred against noble and noble against bishop, and all three oppressed the common people to whom the law gave no redress. An outlaw in those times, when deprived of protection, owed no man allegiance. His head was forfeit if ever he were captured, so his hand was against every man's, and every man's against his. How easy it was to become an outlaw! The shooting of a king's deer, or the incurring of some lord's displeasure, was enough to put a man's life in jeopardy. This was the day not only of oppression by church and state, but also of the struggle between the Saxon landholders and their Norman conquerors. Robin Hood was, first of all, a Saxon who stood out for the rights of the people, waging war against knights, sheriffs, abbots, and moneylenders whose sway was so heavy. But he was fair in war, a protector of women and children, courteous, moreover, to noble and peasant alike, kind to the poor and oppressed, with whom he shared the goods obtained from too heavily laden knight or bishop, generous as well, giving to a bankrupt crusader horse, clothing, and money to recover his estate, a respecter of honest labouring men and tradesfolk, whom his men were forbidden to molest. Brave to rashness, proud and adventurous, ready to give blows as quickly as take them, and to defy the sheriff within his walled town. Skilled and adroit and resourceful, finally a man of frank, open countenance, singing among the lights and shadows of the good greenwood, and jesting in the face of death itself. This is the picture which all the singers and storytellers give of him. Is there any wonder that the common people loved him? This love extended from him to all the members of his hardy band. God save Robin Hood and all his good yeomanry is the way many of the ballads end. The clever archer who could outshoot his fellows, the brave yeoman inured to blows, and the man who could be true to his friends through thick and thin were favourites for all time, and have been idealised in the persons of Robin Hood and his merry outlaws. Stories of their deeds are the epics of the common people, just as the earlier stories of King Arthur and his knights are the epics of the courtly class. The striking contrast of these two classes is shown in the forest scene, where King Richard meets the yeoman on equal terms. This and other parallel portraits of Richard and Robin Hood or Locksley have been drawn in enduring fashion by Sir Walter Scott in Ivanhoe. If Robin Hood really lived, it was probably sometime during the 12th and 13th centuries. Joseph Ritson, who is accounted the first modern authority on this subject, found warrant for the supposition that he was born at Locksley, the county of Nottingham, about the year 1160, during the reign of Henry II. His true name was Robert Fitzooth, and he came from good family. By some writers, he was reputed to be the rightful Earl of Huntingdon. He was a wild, adventurous youth whose debts or other follies drove him to the forests of Barnesdale in Yorkshire and Sherwood in Nottinghamshire. Being declared an outlaw, he had no recourse but to remain in hiding until a new king should come to the throne or other public event work in his favour. Meanwhile, he mustered a picked band of outlaws who became noted for their prowess and daring. They successfully defied the laws for many years, making other rough and ready laws of their own. King Henry died in 1189, and his son, Richard the Lionheart, was hailed as king. But the government was then in a poor state owing to Richard's absence upon a crusade and his brother John's weak regency. A history of the period by Mayer had this passage. About this time, as I conjecture, the notorious robbers, Robert Hood of England and Little John, lurked in the woods, spoiling the goods only of rich men. They slew nobody but those who attacked them or offered resistance in defence of their property. Robert maintained by his plunder 100 archers, so skilful in fight that 400 brave men feared to attack them. He suffered no woman to be maltreated and never robbed the poor, but assisted them abundantly with the wealth which he took from abbots. When Richard returned to England, it is said that he forgave Robin Hood and attached his yeomen to the royal guard. But on Richard's death, his successor John drove Robin again into outlawry, which continued until Robin's death. The ruins of a castle are still shown where the outlaw defied the king's men, but there are also many hills, woods, rocks, and caverns which are spoken of as Robin Hood's. The date of his death has been set down doubtfully as the 24th of December, 1247, but this would make him a very old man, too old to do the deeds of strength ascribed to him up to the day of his death. One of the earliest printed ballads gives Robin a later period and asserts that it was not King Richard but King Edward, one of the first three, who pardoned him in Sherwood Forest. Maid Marian has also been variously identified as a figure of history. She is said to have been a Mistress Fitzwalter, daughter of an earl, and a tomb is still pointed out as hers. The earliest accounts of Robin Hood are found in ballads and songs which go back to the 13th century. As this was before printing was known, they came down from generation to generation by word of mouth. Ballads of this nature were very popular at festivals and public gatherings. They were usually improvised by some chief singer who found his theme in a well-known event, and all his listeners joined in the chorus, keeping time to the rhythm of the lines by patting their feet or dancing upon the village green. The popularity of the Robin Hood songs and belief in this hero are shown by the numerous examples which have come down to our own day, while songs on many other subjects are forgotten. The first historical allusion to Robin Hood is found in a book called Piers Plowman, written about 1362, where his rhymes are mentioned as being well known. The next notice is in Winton's Scottish Chronicle about 1420, where both Robin Hood and Little John are ascribed to the year 1283. In Forden and Bower's Scotichronicon, a 15th century work, the two outlaws are said to have lived in 1266. Mayer, the Scottish writer of the first quarter of the 16th century, who is quoted above, is the next to mention Robin Hood, giving him, in the History of Great Britain, a period during the life of Richard I, which is now generally accepted. Caxton introduced the art of printing into England in 1477, and one of the earliest books published thereafter was a collection of Robin Hood ballads between 1489 and 1510, entitled Here Beginneth a Little Jest of Robin Hood and His Mainy, and of the Proud Sheriff of Nottingham. The book was printed by Wynkyn de Worde. Toward the end of the 16th century, Anthony Munday wrote his successful play of the downfall of Robert, Earl of Huntingdon. This play and the doubtful epitaph quoted in the last story are the chief grounds for supposing that Robin Hood was ever anything more than a simple yeoman. In 1832, the industrious scholar Joseph Ritson made the first anthology of this material in a book entitled Robin Hood, a collection of poems, songs, and ballads, which was prefaced by a life. Ritson's book has been largely followed by succeeding writers. In 1853 appeared a collection of the ballads with A Historical Sketch of Robin Hood by William W. Campbell. A later library of English and Scottish ballads, edited by Francis James Child, presents a full collection of Robin Hood songs in connection with other subjects. Professor Arber's English Garner gives the little jest, as also does John M. Gutcher's edition of these and other ballads. In the present prose stories, the old ballads have been followed for their spirit and main situations. The idea has been to weave them together to form one continuous narrative, making a complete, consistent picture of the great outlaws' life in the forest. Every story is begun by verses from the ballad upon which it is based, and frequently, throughout the pages, the exact language is used. Incidents are told more fully than could have been done in the rhymed original, but always in line with what is naturally suggested between the verses. And if any of the appeal and charm of those original verses, their bubbling humour, simple gaiety, dash, swing, and the fragrance of growing things upon a fresh May morning have passed into these lines of prose, the writer will feel more than repaid for a labour which throughout was one of fascination and deep interest. J.W.M. And that's the introduction to this book, Robin Hood and His Merry Outlaws.